Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, November 7th, 2024. All right, first thing, another reminder that we are wrapping up our fund drive this week. So if you have the means, if you read antiwar.com, and you appreciate what we do, please go to antiwar.com/donate to help us get over that finish line. And of course, the big news on Wednesday was Trump's victory over Kamala Harris. And we have some stories related to that, some reactions over Trump's victory related to Israel and Ukraine. But first, the first story today is dealing with the ethnic cleansing that's happening in northern Gaza. We've basically had confirmation from the Israeli military that it's happening, even though we've known it. It's been very clear now for a while, but they've explicitly said so now. So the first story at the top of antiwar.com, report details Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign in northern Gaza. So a report from the Israeli newspaper Haaretz published on Wednesday detailed the situation in Beit Lahia, a city in northern Gaza near the Israeli border, where Israeli forces are implementing an ethnic cleansing campaign. At the beginning of October, Israel ordered hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in northern Gaza to head south. Many ignored the order since there was nowhere safe to go, and the Israeli military focused its renewed assault on the north on Bet Lahia and neighboring Beit Hanun and Jabalia, where it imposed a full siege to starve out civilians. So I included just a screenshot from Google Maps so people get an idea here. Bet Lahia is really the first city in the north on the border with Israel. Bet Hanun is to the east. There's a neighborhood of Bet Lahia to the west called Atatra, and then Jabalia is to the south. And then south of Jabalia is Gaza City. And then south of Gaza City is the Netzarim corridor, which is that strip of land that the Israeli military controls. Now, they want all the Palestinians to go south of there. But what it looks like they've been doing, and they are saying they're almost complete with this, is basically just focusing on these areas, down to Jabalia first. Basically, they've cut this area of northern Gaza in half. And the Israeli military has said that it forcibly expelled 55 Palestinians from the Jabalia refugee camp, and it has no intention of allowing them back. According to Haaretz, only a few thousand civilians remain in Bet Lahia and Bet Hanun. So an Israeli military spokesman, Brigadier General Itzik Cohen, he said this to reporters on Tuesday night in Israel. So this was election day in the U.S., that he said, quote, "There is no intention of allowing the residents of the northern Gaza Strip to return to their homes," end quote. Now, if you listen to this show, we have covered reports about the Israeli military preventing Palestinians from returning to their homes. But here is, explicit confirmation from the Israeli military that, yeah, we're pushing these Palestinians out and we're not going to let them return. So then this Haaretz report, these reporters who wrote it, they just recently traveled. They were just in these areas, Beit Lahia and the Atatra, which is, again, a neighborhood to the southwest of the city. They were just in these areas to see the destruction, and this is what they reported back. The report says, quote, "In Al-Atatra and Beit Lahia, there is not a single house that people can return to and live in. The area looks like it was hit by a natural disaster. There are no civilians to be seen among the ruins," end quote. They said that in an attempt to remove any remaining civilians at night, the Israeli military fires artillery shells into the city just to pressure the remaining civilians to leave and to make sure people who left don't come back. So just firing indiscriminately into this area for the purpose of cleansing it of Palestinian civilians. The report said, quote, "Those who want to return can't do so because the army prevents it. The bottom line is that it makes no difference what the IDF calls its actions. The army has begun the stage of cleansing the northern strip while it prepares to hold on to the area for a long time to come, end quote. And Israeli media has reported that the Israeli military is carrying out a version of the general's plan, which is an outline for the ethnic cleansing drawn up by retired IDF generals that we've talked about quite a bit. Basically, again, this plan, the idea is to get them south of the Netzarim corridor. But for now, it looks like they're getting them south, kind of pushing them all into Gaza City. And then when they're done in these areas, I would guess the next step is to push them from Gaza City down. And of course, they've killed thousands. They're starving people to death while they're doing this. And under this plan, they order an evacuation, and then anyone who's left is treated as a combatant, and they're either killed by starvation or military action. And again, that's exactly what we've seen happening here. So the Israeli military claims that this cleansing campaign is about removing Hamas. The IDF commander who's in charge of Bet Lahia, Colonel Yaniv Barot, acknowledged that they found no militant infrastructure in the area. The Haaretz report says, quote, Barot says his mission is to continue to locate and eliminate terror infrastructure and Hamas activists. But he says that in the course of the most recent operation, no underground infrastructure, heavy war material, or weapons production sites were found, end quote. So again, what they're doing is cleansing the area for the sake of cleansing it and taking it over. The Haaretz report said the activity on the ground proves that the Israeli military is bisecting northern Gaza. And of course, this could pave the way to Jewish settlements, which is supported by many Israeli ministers and members of the Knesset. And the Biden administration claims that it opposes this general's plan and everything, but they continue to provide military aid for this ethnic cleansing campaign that is happening as we speak, that has been happening for a month now. And again, if you look at the map, the Haaretz report mentioned this, right on the other side of the border, there's all these settlers set up these tent camps, and they have signs saying, next stop is Gaza. So these people are literally ready to run in and camp out in Gaza. So this could happen. This is something I think that could happen much sooner than I initially expected. The settlers actually just setting up in northern Gaza. I mean, in these areas, they're destroying all the homes, bulldozing everything, creating roads so it's easier for the military to move around. So again, this is happening. Ethnic cleansing, U.S.-supported, funded ethnic cleansing campaign is ongoing. All right, the next one here, 5 Palestinians killed in Israeli airstrike on northern Gaza. There was no update from the Palestinian Health Ministry today. I just ran this story about some airstrikes that happened in northern Gaza. This is from Wafa. So at least 5 Palestinians were killed this evening in an Israeli airstrike that targeted a group of civilians in the Tal al-Zatar area located in the northern Gaza Strip. So this was Wednesday evening in Gaza. According to the Al-Auda Hospital in Jabalia, northern Gaza, the victims, along with several others injured, were brought to the facility following the attack. Medical teams confirmed the casualties and are attending to the wounded. Earlier on Wednesday, another Israeli airstrike took the lives of 4 people and left multiple others injured when a drone targeted a group of civilians in the Ramal neighborhood of Gaza City. The attack occurred near the Palestinian Red Crescent's ambulance and emergency services headquarters. So the strikes in the north continue, even in Gaza City, where right now they're pushing all the Palestinians into. All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu congratulates Trump, discusses Iran. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with President-elect Donald Trump to congratulate him on his victory against Vice President Kamala Harris and said that the two discussed the Iranian threat. According to a statement released by Netanyahu's office, the Israeli leader was among the first to call Trump after his victory. The statement said, quote, their conversation was warm and cordial. The prime minister congratulated President-elect Trump on his election victory. The two agreed to work together for Israel's security and also discussed the Iranian threat, end quote. In a separate statement, Netanyahu called Trump's victory the world's greatest comeback and appeared to take a shot at President Biden by saying that Trump's return to the White House, quote, offers a new beginning for America and a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America, end quote. You see this picture here. This is in Tel Aviv, a big billboard congratulating Trump. Congratulations, Trump. Make Israel great. So during his time in office, Trump was extremely pro-Israel. He often says he was the most pro-Israel president ever. I would say President Biden has taken the throne, has beat him in that title because he has provided Israel with more military aid in 1 year than any U.S. president in history. But the way Trump campaigned was that, Biden abandoned Israel. So one thing that I thought was worth mentioning is Trump's relationship with what Netanyahu did sour in 2020, in November 2020, when Netanyahu congratulated Biden on winning the election when Trump was still disputing the results. And then in an interview with Barak Ravid, the Axios reporter, Trump had some very hard words for Netanyahu, saying he was done with them, that it was a terrible decision for him to congratulate Biden after all he gave him. Yet the two have been very friendly as Trump has been on the campaign trail this year. The Washington Post reported that during a call in October, Trump praised Israeli military actions in Lebanon following Israel's dramatic escalations. So he basically congratulated Netanyahu on the invasion and the escalations in Lebanon. And they quoted someone who else was on the call with Trump and Netanyahu, and that's Senator Lindsey Graham, which not a good sign that Trump's been palling around with him. Graham said, referring to the Trump talking to Netanyahu, he said, quote, "He didn't tell him what to do militarily, but he expressed that he was impressed by the pagers. He expressed his awe for their military operations and what they have done. He told them, do what you have to do to defend yourself," end quote. And I mentioned some other things here about the campaign. Trump receiving $100 million from Miriam Adelson. That's not a good sign. She's the widow of, I'm blanking on his first name. Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate, who was a major donor to Trump. And Trump said at some event with Miriam Adelson that Sheldon and Miriam were his most frequent guests to the White House, and they're always asking for things for Israel. So, again, not a good sign. We know that Miriam Adelson wants the U.S. to support the Israeli annexation of the West Bank. Trump has vowed that he will strongly support Israel when he returns to office, and has said that Israel has to finish the problem. Finish the job has kind of been his message. And he's referring to this genocidal war that's happening in Gaza. He's saying, finish it up, wrap it up. And according to a recent report from the Times of Israel, Trump has told Netanyahu that he wants the war to be over by the time he returns to office by January 20th, 2025. However, one of the Times of Israel sources said that Trump was not specific in his appeal to Netanyahu, and that Trump could well back residual Israeli military activity in Gaza. So, Israel declaring that the war's over wouldn't really mean much if there's still this military activity. And, if they take over all of northern Gaza by the time Trump comes in, then they might declare victory and then just slowly work their way down. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. When it comes to Trump, when it comes to Ukraine, I am optimistic. When it comes to Israel, it's hard to imagine. Trump is a wild card. That's the only reason why I'm, hoping things won't be as bad as expected here. Other people that we saw really celebrate Trump's victory was Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, Sedler, who's openly in favor of the ethnic cleansing and settlements. He was very happy. Same thing with Bezalel Smotrich. All right, so the next one here, Trump is eyeing Iran hawk Brian Hook as first foreign policy pick. So this is an article from Drop Site News. This isn't the best sign. Brian Hook, a hawkish fixture of the first Donald Trump administration, who formerly served under George W. Bush, is reportedly getting the call to start staffing the State Department for a new Trump term. Hook, known as a major Iran hawk who helped lead the maximum pressure campaign of sanctions, sabotage, and assassinations that characterized Trump's approach to Tehran, has been appointed to help oversee the formation of a new foreign policy team, according to reports from Politico and CNN. Hook served as U.S. Special Representative for Iran and advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during the last 2 years of Trump's presidency. Towards the end, he did resign from the Iran position, and then Elliot Abrams, who's a literal neocon, he took over. We'll get more into the end of some interesting stuff about the last transition period that I want to talk about it for a different story. But so Brian Hook is bad news. These are just reports. I mean, if he's helping staff the State Department, that's not a good sign, especially for when it comes to Iran. So that's, we're going to really get a good idea of what the Trump foreign policy is going to look like once he starts filling out his cabinet. I think the Vance pick was good sign for Ukraine, not so much a good sign for Israel. He's very pro-Israel, but we will see. All right, so the next one here, report says Israel Mulls attack on Iran nuclear sites. So Bloomberg reported on Wednesday that Israel is considering hitting Iran's civilian nuclear facilities during the U.S. presidential transition period. The report cited an Israeli official familiar with the thinking inside the Israeli security cabinet, who said the handover period might provide Israel with a window to attack Iran's nuclear program. Realistically, if Israel really wants to do damage to this nuclear program, they would likely need support from the U.S. A U.S. official also told Bloomberg that just ruled out the idea that Biden would order any kind of attack like that. But this isn't a good sign if they are talking about this, because there is a way, I think, a path towards getting the U.S. to fly heavy bombers and drop a bunch of bunker busters on Iran between now and January 20th. I think the Biden administration will try to avoid that. But I think what this report tells us is that Israel's looking for escalation for these next couple months. And the way how things are so volatile in the region, we could get to a point like that, I think. So, because if they really escalate and Iran really hits Israel hard, which they can with their missiles, they can really do damage, then the U.S. is going to directly intervene, and then who knows where it's going to go from there. During the last transition period, tensions were very high with Iran as well. Israel carried out a covert attack, this is November 2020, inside Iran that killed Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who's an Iranian nuclear scientist. That was a big deal. And at that time, Elliot Abrams and Mike Pompeo were it was really Abrams leading the effort. They were just adding sanction after sanction on Iran, and the purpose was to prevent the Biden administration from coming in and returning to the Iran nuclear deal. So they made that as difficult as possible. And they were successful because the Biden came in and he didn't return to it. He dragged his feet. They started negotiations, but Biden wasn't really willing to take the steps necessary to restore that deal. The Israeli official speaking to Bloomberg said that Netanyahu considered Iran's nuclear program an existential threat. There's no evidence at this time that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has decided to build a nuclear weapon. That's also been recently reaffirmed by the CIA. However, there's been a lot of talk inside Iran from the parliament, from some officials saying, hey, maybe we should consider our nuclear doctrine. And that's in response to this Israeli aggression. So Khamenei issued a fatwa in 2003 prohibiting the development of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. Iran does not want nuclear weapons, but again, this conversation is happening because of all these escalations from Israel, which is a nuclear-armed state. But again, there's no sign that any step like that has been taken yet, because that's something that if they could claim and use as a pretext to hit the nuclear facilities. But right now, there is no sign of that. And Iran is currently enriching uranium at 60%, which is the highest level that it has achieved, but it's still lower than the 90% needed for weapons-grade uranium. And it's Israeli aggression led to Iran enriching to the 60% level. They took that step in April 2021 in response to an Israeli sabotage attack on the Natanz nuclear facility. They planted a bomb in there somehow and blew it up. Going back, before that, they were enriching uranium at 20%, and they did that in response to the assassination of Fakhrizadeh. So Israel does all these covert attacks, these escalations with Iran. Iran responds by increasing its nuclear activity, and then they point to that as evidence of Iran racing toward a bomb. When it's clear they're using that as leverage for negotiation with the U.S. and to, deter Israel from doing these things, but they haven't learned their lesson. And the 2015 nuclear deal, just talking about the enrichment levels, that restricted Iran's uranium enrichment at a very low level at 3.67%. But since the U.S. withdrew from that in 2018 at the behest of Israel, Iran is no longer bound by that agreement. So, again, just not a good sign that I would be surprised if Israel tries to bomb the nuclear facilities on its own. I think it's just a bad sign that they're going to be looking for something to happen in the next 2 months. 2.5 months or whatever. The next one here, Iraq denies reports that Iran is planning to attack Israel from its territory. So the Iraqi government on Wednesday denied reports that Iran is planning to launch a major attack against Israel from Iraqi territory, saying the rumors were false pretexts meant to justify aggression against Iraq. This is Iraq's Council for National Security. It said, quote, Iraq's national interests demand distancing its land and airspace from the hostilities fueled by Israel's expansionist and aggressive policies toward nations and peoples in the region, end quote. So Iraqi Shia militias have been launching drone attacks against Israel, but nothing really significant. According to these reports that Iraq is denying, the U.S. and Israeli intelligence are claiming Iran has moved ballistic missiles to Iraq and that they're going to fire a major attack from there. So we'll see. Iranian officials are vowing that they're going to respond to those recent Israeli airstrikes on Iran, which killed 4 Iranian soldiers and 1 civilian. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. So the next one here, Ukrainian officials feel a lot of anxiety over Trump victory. So on Wednesday, Zelensky congratulated President-elect Donald Trump on his impressive election victory, as he put it. But behind the scenes, Ukrainian officials are really feeling a lot of anxiety, according to a report from Financial Times. So Trump campaigned on ending the war in Ukraine, although he never really laid out a plan to reach that goal. His running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, has been a lot more explicit, policy-wise. He has suggested in an interview with the New York Times, he said that he would favor a deal to end the war that would freeze the current battle lines, guarantee Ukrainian neutrality and independence, but still allow for some sort of U.S. military assistance for Ukraine. An unnamed Ukrainian defense official told Financial Times that many people in the Ukrainian military are afraid that a Trump victory means U.S. aid will stop and that Ukraine will lose the Donbass. Another Ukrainian official said, quote, for us, U.S. support means life or death. We need to convince Trump to be with us, end quote. So on the other hand, you had Kamala Harris campaigning to continue the proxy war. But either way, there's signs that things are going to wind down. I think even if Harris won, things are going to wind down in some way in 2025. I think it's more likely with Trump. You had Zelensky saying that he thinks the war is going to be over by next year, but he's running around trying to push his victory plan, which is really just, it's not going to lead to any sort of Ukrainian victory, but it's just going to escalate things. He wants long-range strikes inside Russia, the things that really risk nuclear war. Zelensky said on Wednesday that when he spoke with Trump back in September, they discussed, quote, in detail the Ukraine-U.S. strategic partnership, the victory plan, and ways to put an end to Russian aggression against Ukraine, end quote. So during his time in the White House, Trump escalated U.S. involvement in Ukraine by providing Javelin anti-tank missiles, which marked the first U.S. provision of what they call lethal aid to Ukraine. So Trump did escalate that. And then later in his administration, he briefly delayed a shipment of military aid to Ukraine, which was used by the House to impeach him over allegations that he was seeking a quid pro quo to get Zelensky to investigate Biden's involvement in Ukraine. And that's a claim that Zelensky has always denied. So it was really amazing, actually, that he was impeached for delaying a weapon shipment to Ukraine. Just briefly. It wasn't even very long that it was actually delayed, just a few weeks. But so it's just crazy. And the way that they framed that whole impeachment was like, completely insane. But, there's always that to keep in mind. So Trump, he's tough to predict, but I do think with Ukraine, we have more of a chance here with this thing winding down. And the next one here, Biden team wants to rush weapons to Ukraine before inauguration. So things are not going to wind down within the next 2 months. Politico reported on Wednesday that the Biden administration is preparing to rush over $6 billion in military aid to Ukraine before Inauguration Day. The report said the Biden team expects the incoming administration to end the weapons flow. So I hope they're right. I hope their fears are correct. The Biden administration has $4.3 billion in military aid that can be pulled from existing U.S. stockpiles, known as the Presidential Drawdown Authority. There is also $2.1 billion available in the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which provides money to put weapons under contract, meaning that it takes longer to deliver. Biden officials are unsure if they will be able to rush all the aid to Ukraine before January 20th, since any military equipment they send must be replaced, and it's unclear if production levels are high enough to ship so many weapons in such a short period of time. This is an interesting quote from a guy named Mark Kansian. He's a former Pentagon budget official. He said, quote, "We have been sending whatever industry can produce each month. We have been sending whatever industry can produce each month. But the problem is you can only send these things as they are produced." End quote. So he's saying they've just been sending as much as the U.S. defense military industrial complex, I should say, can produce. They've just been shipping it all, all these artillery shells. So you talk about the boondoggle for the arms makers and that could be part of the thinking here. So they want to rush all these weapons, even though, they know that it's not going to make a difference, but they want to make sure that all the contracts are signed and everything's good before they get out. I mean, that's just it's just crazy. But there's no sign, and I would be surprised if these things that Zelensky's calling for, the long-range strikes, I don't think we're going to see the buy. I think they're not going to take those escalations. I would be surprised if that happens within the next 2.5 months. But you never know. These people do still surprise me. I'm going to be happy to see Blinken not be the Secretary of State, even though his replacement probably won't be much better, but I really don't like him. He's got to be the worst. I mean, man. Anyway, is the next one here. Israeli airstrikes kill at least 40 in Baalbek. This article is from Jason Ditz. It's been over a week since Israel imposed a full evacuation order on the entire Lebanese city of Baalbek, a city which has seen constant human habitation for roughly 11,000 years. Scores have been killed in and around the city since then, and the attacks have been ongoing in and outside of the evacuation zones. So on Wednesday, there was another escalation of strikes. At least 40 people were killed inside Baalbek and the surrounding areas. The health ministry said also 53 people were wounded, which was roughly in line with figures reported by the governor there. So the governor said that there are at least 40 separate Israeli strikes. So huge strikes here in Baalbek. And it's not clear what was specifically targeted in any of the attacks, and Israel has not commented. So there are reports that at least one of the strikes hit the Al-Manshaya archaeological area, so one of these ancient sites. The strike was less than 200 meters from some particularly important historical site, and officials say it is still too dangerous to check if any specific sites were damaged in the strike. So it's a real shame that this ancient city is coming under attack like that. The next one here, at least 30 killed in Israeli attack on central Lebanon town of Barja. This is another one from Jason. So late on Tuesday, Israel carried out airstrikes against the town of Barja, about 18.5 miles south of the Lebanese capital of Beirut. The attacks came without warning, hitting an apartment building and killing and wounding many civilians. 15 were reported killed initially, but the toll continued to rise through Tuesday night on into Wednesday as rescue workers recovered more bodies from the rubble. The current death toll is at 30, with more bodies expected to be found. 14 wounded survivors have also been recovered. The targeted apartment building is reported to have housed a large number of displaced civilians from surrounding areas. Barja is midway between Beirut and Sidon, and both of the cities have endured airstrikes and evacuation orders for weeks. And this is one of the towns that is not listed on the evacuation orders, but still getting bombed. So still really heavy Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon. All right, the last story here, unprecedented pro-Israel PAC funding flooded elections. So this article is from the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, which is a great magazine that covers lots of stuff related to the Israel lobby and everything. So this is about the funding. I would recommend going and checking out this article, seeing the spending on certain House members for this election cycle. Wesley Bell, a Democrat from Missouri, was the heaviest hitter, got $2.6 million. That's just in the current race. And then in the Senate current races, the heavy hitter was Jackie Rosen, Democrat from Nevada, $1 million from pro-Israel PACs. And so, here's the total. This is a big number. So the election cycle saw unprecedented spending by the Israel lobby, which donated more to House and Senate candidates than in the last two elections combined. They donated $44 million. $44,656,374. I mean, man, that is a lot of money. And this is in 2023 to 2024. In 2021 to 2022, they spent $17 million. And in 2019 to 2020, they spent $12 million. So again, just significantly more money here. And of course, it's not really a surprise. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Ted Snyder, why Trump's election could be the best thing for Zelensky. One from Doug Bandow, the blob blames its victims. One from Bilal Shabar and Erica Solomon, he dreamed of escaping Gaza. The world watched him burn alive. One from Brad Pierce, Georgians vote against Ukrainization. And one from Branko Marchteach, Morning Joe, Dems' favorite show, blatant pro-Israel propaganda. So please go check all of that out. Again, help us with our fundraiser if you can. I will be, what was I going to say? Sorry, I'm coming down with some kind of cold, so I'm a little out of it. I hope I made sense throughout that whole episode. But support this show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. The Instagram posts have been looking really great. Anyway, I will be back tomorrow. One more show this week. Thanks for listening.